Astrology is the myths of the stars and planets, telling the themes and plots of our lives. These stories come to us daily through our satellite, the Moon. She is constantly spinning astro news. Hi, I'm Merrylin Leblanc with Moonwise. Once again this week, we're going to take a look at the year ahead. Last week, Atma Devi joined me, and we looked at some of the changes for this year, 2017. And today, Daniel Fiverson is joining me to continue that conversation. Welcome back to Moonwise, Daniel.
Thank you, Merrylin. It's always great to be here.
It's good to have you. You know, one of the things that you do on a regular basis is put out a written document. You post this on your website of what's going on with things. And you made a forecast for 2017, the year of the uninvited guest.
Yes.
What astrologically is that about?
Well, obviously that refers back to the mythological story surrounding Eris, the goddess of discord and chaos. Eris and Uranus have been paired, traveling through the sky now since last year. We've had two conjunctions already, and we've got a third and last conjunction, which is the one that really seals the agreement, if you would, coming up in May. So, in March. So. It has really flavored what's going on in the world. You know, if things work in cycles. You know, when we look at a chart and when we look at an aspect, we're not looking at a point that's frozen in time. We're looking at part of a wider cycle, and in order to really understand it, as you have pointed out so many times, that it is the entire cycle that we really have to understand and examine in order to understand what each point in that cycle is producing in terms of circumstances.
So right now with Eris and Uranus, they're in the process of having ended a cycle and birthing a new cycle. The birthing is still going on.
Right.
But, you know, just from that context, what would you say this past cycle of Eris and Uranus were about?
Well, this cycle began in 1927, and this is the second conjunction in this current cycle. It's a 500-year return, transits to Eris, in the sign of Aries. And we know very well what happened in the 20s and 30s. We had the crash of 29. We had the rise of Hitler. We had the outbreak of World War II. And then we had the Great Depression. So, you know, these are signatures that are unmistakable.
They're with us today. And what I think is interesting, you refer to Eris as the uninvited guest.
Yes.
And what we had at the end of the 1920s, we had this kind of explosion of, you might call it capitalism in a sense, of people having gained lots of capital, right, and the banks not being functional within all of that. And what do we have right now but that same uninvited guest in terms of, I'm going to call it the uninvited guests in this case, I'm going to call the economy, where wealth is rampant, not curtailed, not taxed. And I mean, I'm saying that in a very definitive way, but I do know that it is taxed in some ways. But, you know, the irony here is that wealth, you know, the wealthy are being taxed less and less and less. And then there's another uninvited guest, as I see this, what's going on around us politically and collectively, of migration.
Right.
The immigrant is also looked at,
right,
as the uninvited guest, and yet the immigrant is accused of not paying taxes as a smokescreen for those who could be paying more taxes. So there's this whole play going on that mirrors some of what went on in the 30s.
Well, we also have the uninvited guest as a result of our November election, according to some people.
Yes.
So
yes. I mean, and here again is a kind of a subterfuge. This antiquated process called the Electoral College, selecting the President of the United States. Because I must say that I get a little bit hot under the collar when I hear politicians, namely Republicans, because they are in the majority right now in our Congress and of course taking over the White House, saying that they have a mandate. The people have elected us, and I want to say, yes, for you congressmen, you've been elected in your state. Yes, that's true. But on another level, that isn't true. The people did not elect. It was a system that elected.
Right. Well, Uranus is elitism. And in Aries, it also correlates and expresses as radical self-entitlement. So here we have, that elite, the elite, back in 1781, setting up the Electoral College, and now we have the elite who have collected all this money politically, to stay in office. So, the elitism is really the uninvited guest as well, because it's not populist. There's this great meme that seems to be flourishing, how there's been this populist revolution around the world, but it's not a populist revolution at all. It's an elitist takeover.
Well, this is Uranus and Aries.
Right.
And what does Aries stand for?
It's self.
Yes,
Right,
the individual.
Right.
It's
So
it's an individual in which the word pride keeps coming to mind, but there's another word that's escaping me.
vanity.
Vanity is blown up. And I want to go back. I know that you often refer to the myth of Prometheus with Uranus, but I'm going to go back to the original myth that was referred to, and that was Uranus, I want to say married to Gaia, and birthing all these children that he thought were ugly, etc. They weren't meeting his standards, and so away with them. Sort of sounds familiar, doesn't it? What doesn't meet your standards, let's get rid of it, out of here.
Right.
Get rid of them, eliminate them, whatever.
Well, one of the phrases that's going around, he's going to drain the swamp.
Drain the swamp, right? But what happened to him in the end?
What happened to him in the end is that you live by the sword, you die by the sword. It was his own children who basically turned the tables on him. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's that little saying, what goes around comes around.
Right. So it's pretty clear that the Uranus influence is going to permeate this year in a number of ways. We, as you discussed last week, we have the lunar nodes entering Aquarius and Leo. We have the last conjunction of Uranus and Eris coming up this year, which is going to be sandwiched in between the two eclipses, which we'll talk about a little later today. And we have a Saturn trine to Uranus as well, which, as you pointed out before the show, is a long-standing cycle which began back in the 80s. So we have a lot of things that are, in a sense, culminating. But I feel that this year, I've kind of categorized it as we're like in the evolutionary foothills. And the summit looms in the 2020s, and we're approaching some pretty dramatic events in this country and in the world over the next through the end of this decade and into the next. Okay,
I want to go back to this point you just made about the Saturn-Uranus trine.
Mm-hmm.
This is a waning cycle. It's what we would call the disseminating phase.
It's a disseminating trine.
Cycles,
yeah.
Disseminating trine. How do you see that playing out in this year?
I see that as the saving grace, because Saturn is responsibility and Uranus is the collective. And it is falling on each one of us to accept the responsibility for what's happening. The responsibility is going to fall on those who perhaps will regret a choice that they made back in November. And that choice could also be not showing up in November. So there's work to be done on a individual basis that will all work out in the collective. And it's about taking responsibility for what's going on and not leaving it to the senators and congressmen, to the representatives to look out for our best interests, to assume that everything's on the up and up, and to really delve into its Saturn and Sagittarius to really determine where's the truth here, what's real and what's not real.
Well, and also looking at it cyclically, when it began, we were in the Bush senior administration, a kind of continuation of Reaganomics. And as we're in this disseminating phase, we can begin, and I think many people are awakening to it. I know we have a lot of our listeners listening to Economic Update with and Marxist Richard Wolff, and he's very socialistic in his leanings. And we also we can begin during this disseminating phase to truly understand our economy in a deeper sense, and especially how our economy has unfolded since the 80s. This is the luck of it. I want to make one other comment, too, though, about that in terms of what started to appear. The 80s were really the beginning of a birthing of technology and it mushrooming throughout the cycle.
The Internet appeared in the 80s.
The Internet, the smartphones, the cell phones, et cetera.
Right.
And so this is a period for us to really look at and now what are we having with WikiLeaks and and privacy on the internet, net neutrality, et cetera, to really understand how all of this plays together. In some ways, our privacy is gone.
Well, the disseminating phase is the waning phase this is the manifestation. This is when everything shows up. It becomes real. Pluto and Capricorn is this is reality, and it's all part of the same paradigm that's unfolding in front of us. And we are now observing and experiencing the realities that we have created. And in this last trine and in this in the squares from Jupiter to Pluto, certainly we're being forced to really decide, is this what we want? We've created it, but is this really what we want to live with? And in this last phase, we get the opportunity to make some changes and make some adjustments so that the final product, as we come to closure of the cycle, will be exactly really what we intended. Was this our intention?
And what do we want going forward?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
You're listening to Moonwise here on KSFR 101.1 FM. I'm Merrylin Leblanc with my guest Daniel Fiverson today. It's time for the Moon Minute. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to Moonwise. I'm Merrylin Leblanc with my guest Daniel Fiverson. We're talking about some of the astrological configurations affecting the year ahead, 2017. At the beginning of the show, we talked about Eris, a new planet out there, and Uranus, and how Uranian this year is for us. And coming up also are some other changes, Daniel, and I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the eclipses for this year.
Well, let's. I think we should start with the T-square, because there was a powerful T-square that's been active since last year, and it's going to continue halfway through this year. We've got Jupiter opposite Uranus, so we've got that Aries Libra opposition working, and it's squaring Pluto. And what Jupiter is doing, we all know by now, I hope, that Uranus and Pluto have been in this epic square since, for 5 years. We've had seven epic exact perfections. And now Jupiter is triggering it in a big way. Uranus and Pluto are going out with a flourish, if you would, or with, they're not going away quietly. And Jupiter is going to make sure that all of the changes and all of the transition, in some ways our planet is disintegrating. We've seen disintegration everywhere. all the things that we took for granted, all of the things that we considered to be solid, are shaking beneath our feet. And Jupiter's coming along and expanding that. Jupiter enlarges anything that it touches. It's, traditionally it's known as the greater benefic. But, if it touches something that's not so benefic, it doesn't make it benefic.
And what it's making us aware of more so than anything in my mind are our relationships.
Yeah, that's it. Sure.
Our relationships and the order or the rules or the laws that we make them work by. It brings that into consciousness. And one of the most remarkable things in terms of the world tensions and the political tensions that we've been talking about earlier in the show is that people are really aware of the rules. You probably heard on the news the past few days that the Congress, the House of Representatives, wanted to get rid of this ethics committee. Right. What was amazing is overnight that got changed. And how did it get changed? Because people contacted their legislators. Mm-hmm. People bombarded Washington, D.C. with you don't have a free ticket to do things that are not right. And this is Libra.
Well, this is also Jupiter. That Saturn trine to Uranus that I just talked about, where people are waking up. Uranus is an awakener. And Saturn is, really, sure, it's the lord of karma, but there's a choiceless awareness here where people are realizing that they're up against a wall. And if not now, when? So yes, the public outcry, it's going to increase. It's not going to quiet down anytime soon. And this is a good thing because this is really how democracy is supposed to work. We've gotten very complacent. We have all this technology that you described, and there has been tremendous growth economically and more abundance for some people in the world and in our country, and complacency has really gotten rooted, if you would. And part of what's happening is we're being shocked. It's a little bit of shock and awe. To knock us out of this complacency that we've slipped into, to believe that everything's just going to be okay and we don't have to work at it.
Right. And it's funny, it's strange. I mean, the tensions that are here, it's not always easy to really know what the truth is.
Right.
I mean, we're turning around left and right and saying, I just heard this, but is it really true? Right. And then we're hearing about fake news, mm-hmm. and we're hearing about news media putting out fake news. It's you couldn't get it any more chaotic. Thank you, Neptune in Pisces.
Right. Well, Neptune is also ultimate meaning. It's the higher octave of Venus. Venus is where we find meaning in our lives. It's our priorities. It's what becomes important to us. It's what's essential. And Neptune is the higher octave of that. It's the ultimate meaning. It's truth with a capital T. And Jupiter is our beliefs. So, in this T-square, what we're seeing with Jupiter squaring Pluto is a clash of realities, because we are what we believe. We make our decisions, we make our choices, we live according to what it is that we think is true. And so what we saw happen in November was, three realities clashing, coming up hard against each other. We saw, the Bernie supporters and the Hillary supporters and the Trump supporters, and each one of them was totally hunkered down in their position, to the point where I believe it really destroyed the Democratic Party, because it made a difference in the election. And it could be that the real.
Well, the Democratic Party destroyed itself.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. That's what I'm implying. That there was a clash of beliefs and of realities even within the party. So now we're experiencing all that. But what's happening is that Pluto is our evolutionary engine, and it will create inner and outer experiences that literally compel us to see this. We're moving through times where it can't be ignored anymore. We're being compelled to react, to either react, be proactive, or reactive, and it really depends. One of the things I like to say is that when Uranus transits, one of two things will happen: either we get sucked into the psychodrama, or we objectify and we take a step back and we say, okay, what do we need to do proactively? And everybody's going to make a different choice at that fork in the road.
Well, that's Uranus. What happens when Pluto is around?
Well, it's what
I have something.
Well, it's what I said. It's those inner and outer experiences that are created. It's creating realities. It's Capricorn. Capricorn is reality. It's Saturn.
Well, I have this simple way of saying that Pluto, just takes away what you really have to do without in order for you to get who you are.
That's true. That's true.
And if you're on that track, then Pluto starts enriching you, like the fertilizer. It starts enriching the situation.
I like to believe that we are all on that track. It's just that track is very long, and it's step by step. And we've all taken every step along the way to be where we are. And wherever somebody is on that track is where they need to be.
All right. How do you see the eclipses fitting into this scenario?
Well, the eclipses are really interesting because, again, we're activating Uranus and Leo for the most part. We do have a Pisces solar eclipse that's going to happen, but then we have a Leo eclipse. And that Leo eclipse in August is the first eclipse in 38 years that's going to be, not only is it total, but it's going to be visible across the entire continental United States. And we know the one thing that everybody agrees on about eclipses is that if you can see it, you're going to feel it. So,
and that's a North Node eclipse. So that starts what I call the soul year, SOUL. And of course, we'll be talking more about that as it approaches.
But what's really interesting about the eclipse season, the eclipse seasons for 2017, is that they point back to eclipses occur in cycles, 18 and 19-year cycles, Saros, Metonic. It's another whole show we could do. But the point is that they repeat. And the eclipses that are coming up refer back to 1998. And coincidentally, not coincidentally, in 1998 we had both Paula Jones and the Lewinsky scandal affecting the presidency of the United States. And the House of Representatives actually initiated impeachment hearings. So, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up or get anybody depressed, but, this is the energy that's out there. The eclipses, I use the Gemini rising chart for the U.S., and the eclipses occur in the 4th and 10th houses. So, we're looking at 10th house is our leader. That's our president. The 4th house is our security. It's the people. So these are the issues that will swirl. The other thing that's interesting about eclipses is that they also point back to the sign that the cycles began in, and the cycle for the Saros cycle for the Leo eclipse began in Cancer, and the Saros cycle for the Pisces eclipse began in Virgo. So Virgo is growth through crisis, and Cancer, as I said, is security. It's emotional security. It's family. It's what we have gathered around us and hold on to because it's where we feel secure. So there's it's going to be an interesting year, to say the least. We are blessed to be born in interesting times.
You're mentioning those the eclipses in the chart that you use in the 4th and the 10th house, and I use a different chart, and it reminds me of a question that I skipped over when you were talking about Eris and Uranus in the Sibley chart that I use. The sign of Aries is in the 4th house, and I couldn't help but think also that for us here in the United States, the 4th house has to do with home, family, land, heritage. Who's the uninvited guest? And I couldn't help but think also during this, this whole past year, and as you said, in through March, et cetera, the conjunction, the coming together of Uranus and Eris has been happening, is continuing to happen. That we had Trump referring to the Muslims as sort of uninvited guests. Right. We've also had, the wall, the Mexicans coming in, et cetera. And I couldn't also help but equate that to the whole, and I don't know, in terms of the continent of Europe, the whole migration is such a huge, huge issue. these days. And I don't know, it's sort of like Eris wanted to be included. And we had a sociologist talk on one of our shows a few months back about a borderless world.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps these tensions that we're experiencing may be leading us to the point of recognizing that borders and boundaries, as they are, as we've defined them, are no longer useful.
That's
if we are going to be human to each other.
Right.
So there's something else. Any last words?
Well, the other uninvited guest is the Dakota Pipeline, okay? And, just to balance the scales, Uranus and Eris is not all bad. It's all good, really. In the end, it's all good. But just for the record, John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King were all born with Uranus, Eris, and Aries. Joan of Arc, Teresa of Avila, okay, all happened in the same cycle.
Do you have an opportunity to look at their actual charts to see what houses those occurred in?
I do. I don't have it in my head, but yes, I did.
Yeah, because that would even be more fascinating.
Yes.
It was sort of like I was referring to the United States with the Aries in this particular chart.
The bottom line there is that they all created innovation, revolution, if you would. They all brought some new paradigm to the times in which they lived.
Well, Daniel, we'll just sum that up until next time. And, of course, there will be a next time. More information about what's going on in these times. As the Chinese say, may you live in auspicious times. We indeed are. Right. Happy New Year to all of you out there, and we'll be back with you again next week.